there's this myth that, the world is like this scary, dangerous place, and that if we have more rules and have more, systems in place, checks and balances, well, we can secure those dangers and everyone can be safe.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll be sacrificing freedom, but we'll have more security. And isn't safety what matters most?
It's basically like the Bush administration in a nutshell.
Yeah, exactly. That entire argument is a fallacy.
Mm-hmm.
There is no such thing as safety, really, in the global scheme of things. Every day you go outside, you could die. It's really, there's no such thing as safety. You have to just accept that you are fundamentally unsafe.
Mm-hmm.
There are ways to get closer, but you have to balance that with the freedoms you lose in taking that choice. And that brings me back to, things like Edward Snowden and this whole, the Patriot Act after 9/11 and the NSA's role as now being sort of like against American citizens, in using the argument of protection, that it's all about safety.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't really know what they do. We don't know what they're, fundamentally, it's assumed that the information that they collect is to prosecute Americans. It's really not for terror, or it's when we need people to disappear, here's how we do it.
It's never been used effectively to like stop a terrorist threat.
Right, exactly.
Basically,
And so I think we're at this point where it's time to wake up and realize that we've moved about as much towards security as we possibly can, and we're not any more safe.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's time to look at all the freedom we've given up and sort of recognize that maybe this wasn't the trade we thought it was going to be.
Yeah. And that's happened in other countries too, like,
Absolutely.
Great Britain has its own version of the Patriot Act, for example, and a lot of people don't
Oh my
think
God, it's going on in Hong Kong.
Yeah, absolutely. Global authoritarianism is on the rise, and this Trump is more of a symptom than the root of the problem itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's you see all these right-wing authoritarians that come up in like Brazil and the Netherlands, and even Boris Johnson has Trump-esque tendencies. But yeah, as far as like the security, the fallacy that you bring up, I mean, it's kind of the same thing as like I guess it is called the dangerous world fallacy when you're watching the news, the evening news, and they're talking about how, there's all these crimes and murders and rapes that are going on. Violent crime is at one of its lowest points in decades. Mm-hmm. It really is. Now, it's been kind of trending upward a little bit over the past few years with some of the, again, social unrest that we've been seeing. That's symptomatic of something else. But like the 90s, people like to say that those were like some kind of golden age of prosperity in the United States. Now the 90s sucked.
The 90s birthed grunge, dude.
Yeah, the 90s, you had like mass incarceration. That was and still a huge problem. Violent crime was at its height in the 90s. And obviously, you had waves that came in like the 70s and the 80s as well. This is getting a little bit more philosophical, perhaps, broadly speaking, but when I think of like time travel to past, any time in the past, or people being nostalgic and thinking like, I would, I'd rather live in the 80s or the 60s or whatever. If you're a gay person, any time before 2015 would probably suck. If you're a black person, any time before the present would suck just as much as the present does.
Yeah.
So I don't really buy, and this is kind of getting into like the MAGA, sort of mindset of we need to make America great again, go back to, when America was better. At what time? Because, it was better for some people at this point. Like if you were working a manufacturing job, in the Midwest, then yeah, the mid to late 20th century was probably better for you. But like overall, like just there's, even though there's so much progress that still has yet to be made, the progress that is there, like, I just would rather not live in any time except for the present, although 2020 has been shitty.
Particularly bad.
So maybe 2019,
Yeah, 2019 was good by comparison.
Yeah, 2019 by comparison, but like, broadly speaking, like the present day, even though the arc of history is not always trending, towards like some perfected progressive end goal, and there are setbacks. Like generally speaking, I would rather live in the present than any time in the past, especially because of all the technological advances.
Yeah.
And technology helps. I mean, the smartphone is one of the best things that has helped kind of uncover like police brutality and stuff like that.
Oh man, it's been huge for just the proliferation of information as well. I think we're in an age where we've basically struggled as a species from our inception until now with the preservation of information.
Mm-hmm.
You think about the paintings on cave walls to like hieroglyphics and like the Rosetta Stone, etching things into stone to try to preserve it. Then eventually, obviously the written books, and then the printing press, and then the internet. We've kind of reached a point where information doesn't degrade. It will last forever as long as we maintain it. Our new issue is filtering and sorting all that information. And I think that is why we're having these vitriolic issues now, is that you can find information to substantiate your claim no matter what it is. The question is that information valid or not?
Right. The internet has kind of accentuated the presence in like the social conversation of like flat earthers and
conspiracy
people.
Theories are through the roof right now.
Absolutely. We live, I've heard some people say that we live in sort of a post-truth world, and I think it's true in a lot of ways, because I mean, you're not going to get like the absolute truth from, well, really anybody, but like you're not going to get like, you're going to get a biased perspective from mainstream media. You're going to get a biased perspective from alternative media too, but it's really just a matter of like institutionally, who can you trust these days? And so that's why there is a lot of anti-establishment, sentiment, and also because of economic issues. But like,
well, being suspicious, I don't think inherently is a problem.
Right.
And in fact, I would say you should be suspicious about everything.
Yeah.
But that's where the problem lies, is that we have people that have joined these communities where they trust the other people in the community so much that they're not suspicious of them. So then they can say whatever they want, and it's like, oh, well, you're a good guy, so it's fine.
Yeah.
In
group, out group.
Yeah, and that's true with Trump supporters, and it's also true with non-Trump supporters.
Yeah.
Talking about Snowden one more time, someone at a briefing, it's been several months now, but someone at a press briefing asked Trump if he would look into, dropping the charges for Snowden and allowing him to come home, or at least giving him a fair trial, like if he was going to touch Snowden as a topic at all. And he said, I don't know a lot about it. I'll look into it. Saying I'll look into it spawned this like just series of inflammatory, statements from popular Democrats.
Yeah.
Just totally separating themselves from Snowden, calling him a traitor, calling him, and like, you guys are the liberals. Just because Trump said something, you have to disagree with it,
Well, that's the problem with Democrats today, is that like they run to the right of Trump on so much, especially war.
Just to look different.
Foreign policy, like, again, Trump has been, just like every other American president, in recent history, has been awful on foreign policy. But, the Biden administration is going to be inferior in some ways. They're going to be superior in others. Like, I do think it's good that we would rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement and the Iran deal and stuff like that. But we're not getting out of Afghanistan. No. And the drawdowns that
that's about oil. And will always be about oil.
That is true.